Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to chat to you about the new Canon Eos R. It's a camera that is new on the market. It's a new mirrorless. It's the first mirrorless that Canon has released that is a full frame, and I had the chance to finally test it out. I finally got my hands on it, and I just wanted to give you some of my thoughts because they are very conflicting and I'm very conflicted myself, so I just thought that it would be interesting to share my thoughts with you. First thing first, I would like to thank Pondok Lensa for letting me use the camera again. They were awesome in accommodating me in creating this video. They gave me the lens and they gave me the camera to use, and I had the chance to kind of play around with it and get used to it, so it wasn't super rushed, which was amazing, and I really appreciate that. Make sure to check them out. They are really awesome. If you are in Bali, it's a great option there. Rentals are super cheap. They're probably maybe like $40-50 for a day per camera, which is absolutely insane. Like you don't get those kind of rates anywhere. So definitely check them out. Check out their lenses, their cameras and everything else. Give them a follow on Instagram, and I'm sure you are going to be happy with the rental. So to get into the video, I didn't really have many ideas about the Eos R. I've heard some things. I've heard that in general people weren't too impressed with the camera. It had only like one SD slot, and in general it just wasn't really performing as well as Canon would have hoped, I think. So I was really interested to try and see how I feel about it and how the photos turn out. Okay, so on very first impressions, the camera is quite small. It's kind of the same size as the Sony mirrorless cameras, which is very nice because if you travel and if you go places, it's always handy to have gear that is much smaller. I find the bigger the gear usually is, the harder it is to take it with you. But at the same time, there was just something very plastic about it, and just the design of it and the feel. It is quite light, but at the same time it just looks and feels quite cheap, which is not necessarily the kind of feeling you want to have with your camera. It has that little dial on the top as well, or the little screen preview of your settings, and it looks kind of 1990s. I don't know, it's just, I'm not a huge fan of the design. Obviously it's not the most important thing about the camera, but I find that it kind of affected my user experience in a way because I just wasn't too impressed with it. I just grabbed it and I was like, okay. If you come from a point of being a Canon shooter, where you've been shooting on maybe like a Mark III or Mark IV, it's going to be nice in a way because that means you don't have to invest in all new set of lenses, and you can just buy the adapter and just kind of attach the lenses, and that's that. I have to say, when I was using the adapter, there was absolutely no issue with focusing. It was working quite fast. I tested out the lens that came with it as well. To be honest, it was okay. It was f4. It wasn't great, it was just okay. It was passable. So I mainly used the 24-70 for this photo shoot, and I have to say, how do I say it nicely? So basically, in general, I was really frustrated with the camera on the day. I'm sorry to say, but I wasn't really happy with it. I found it a bit confusing, or maybe not confusing to use, but I found it a bit confusing in terms of, how to twist the little wheels and how to change settings and stuff. And it has touchscreen and so on, but I don't know, it just wasn't the best experience that I've had with the camera. I feel like being frustrated with the camera kind of affected the way I was on the shoot on the day, which is a bummer because you don't really want to have that kind of feeling where you feel frustrated or you feel fed up with the camera and you don't really know, kind of what to do with it and so on. So I feel like this was one of the things that kind of threw me off. And then another thing that really bothered me was the focus. Even though the focus is quite good on the final images, I struggled with it quite a bit on the day. I did the facial recognition, and let me tell you, it's pretty bad. A lot of the time, if there was a model and there was maybe trees in front of her or something, the camera would pick up the leaves as the face, which for me is absolutely ridiculous. If you look at the Sony A7R3 or A7 III, it's just like it blows it out of the water. Like it picks up the eye straight away and it just follows the eye wherever the model goes, and it's so easy to use. And with this one, it just wasn't great. I had to keep readjusting, I had to keep clicking on the screen to adjust the focus, and I was holding it one hand, trying to just focus. It just wasn't ideal. I was really, really frustrated with it. I have to say though, when I was looking at the final images, they were really pin sharp. So when it did pick it up right, it did. It did work very well. It works way better than my Canon 5D Mark IV focusing, I will say that. But at the same time, on the day, it was a really frustrating experience. In general though, I have to say the images turned out quite nice. I'm actually really, really happy with this shoot. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what camera you use. A camera is just a camera. It's just a tool for you as a photographer to take the images. But I find that the user experience was quite frustrating for me. And even though I love the images and I love the way they turned out, and I love, I just applied my presets on them and I just edited them slightly. There wasn't that much editing. It was really beautiful, but it's just, I find that because of the user experience, it kind of affected how I view the camera. And I have to say, in general, overall, it's a good camera. I'm not sure I would spend $2,500 on it. I feel like there's still a good bit to improve with Canon. I think I would probably wait for a bit and see how they improve, on the cameras and so on. So there's lots of things that come into it. There's the fact that, I had a beautiful model and I had an amazing location and the clothing was really nice. By the way, I styled it myself. It's just, there's lots of different elements that make a shoot nice or crappy, let's put it this way. I think that the EOS R is a good camera. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just saying I personally probably won't be reaching for it again, just because of how frustrating it was to to get the focus right and everything else. And I just found it was just too much. And on the day when I'm shooting, this is the last thing I should be stressing about, focusing and trying to make sure that like the focus is on the model's face and not on the leaf. It's not happening. It's not for me. So in general, if you're traveling and you want to downsize from your DSLR, it's a good idea maybe, if you don't want to change lenses and stuff. The adapter worked quite well with the lenses. There was no issue with focusing or anything like that. In that sense, it wasn't like, looking for focus or whatever. It was quite fast. It just wasn't very efficient for the facial recognition, unfortunately. And all the other focus points were just not really working for me either. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel and I will see you next time.